if I uh, stream it to Facebook, but then forget to record. That would have been sad. Okay, so I think we're all set. Um, and I'm going to just double check that I actually hit send on the comment so that if anyone wants to get coached, it is there. Okay, great. And then we are good to go. So in the interest of time, I am going to just get started. If you have any questions or anything, let me know as we're going along, probably by either just unmuting or type it in the chat. Okay. Okay. So we are here. Well, I guess I should introduce myself just in case. If you're not familiar, I'm Caitlin. I love coaching people who wake up in the morning and give all day long. And I help with stress reduction and burnout prevention so that way you can keep doing the things you love without being forced out of them by just burning out and hating it instead of, you got started because you love it. But I have something for everybody. So you're absolutely in the right place. So we're here to talk about reading, right? I had such a hard time narrowing it down to reading. Because this could be applied to so many things. But I swear, keep it to reading. I've made my choice. We're gonna stick with it. And I will let your brain be the one who extrapolates it out to parenting or cleaning your house or whatever else it might be that you're like, this could apply, right? So let's say you have this book sitting on your nightstand, or it's purchased in your Audible account, or it's favorited on Hoopla, or like in your recently borrowed, right? When you scroll back through your library app. And every time you see it, or people share quotes from it on social media or something, you're like, oh, I should really get around to reading that book. How am I going to do this? Right? But it's like over time, this giant guilt mountain or like dread mountain has formed associated with the book, right? So that makes it absolutely impossible to ever get to the action of reading the book, right? It's just become a threat, not this like helpful tool that you once envisioned, right? So first things first, we're going to cover how to let go of the guilt. Then we're going to talk about how to make an actual plan that will actually work for you and not be too idealistic or too pessimistic, right? And then how to actually follow through on that plan. And should you fail, how to apply kindness to your failure in such a way that will make your success inevitable. Okay? Okay. So let's start with how to let go of guilt. Here's how to do it, right? Stop making everything mean something about you. We do this all day long about every little thing, and it'll change your life once you start noticing it and eventually stopping doing it. That's the tricky part, right? So here's what we do. We are constantly seeking out information about who we are as a person based on what is happening, right? So for example, your kid has a screaming meltdown in the store. And even if you don't hear these words consciously, all of the embarrassment is coming from like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad mom, right? Or you wake up to dirty dishes in your house and you make it mean, I'm such a bad housekeeper. Or on the other hand, your friend says, wow, I love your hair. And you make it mean, I am beautiful and lovable. Or maybe your partner, husband, spouse says, I can't believe you forgot again. And you make it mean, I'm just completely hopeless at organization. Something about you, right? Or again, on the other hand, your coworker says, we just couldn't do it without you. And you make it mean, I am needed and my presence is essential. And obviously, some of these lead to positive feelings and some of these lead to negative feelings. But is it true that those specific words that are said or the circumstances that arise are actually the defining moment of whatever identity you're attaching it to, right? Is your child having a meltdown in the store truly the defining moment of what you are as a mother? Or is your coworker saying, we just couldn't do it without you? True. First of all, that's their opinion. And then second of all, is that the defining moment of you as an employee? So, of course, the positive ones will like work for us. So it's worth keeping them. We don't really have to like question the coworker one that much. I was just using it as an example. It's still a little more risky than just building it off of internal validation and your own perception of like, yeah, I'm an awesome employee. I'm an awesome coworker. But that's not the point of this workshop. So we'll have to say that for another time. So yeah, if your kid has a meltdown in a store, for example, that may have absolutely nothing to do with your parenting skills, right? Sometimes life just happens and children with the most loving parents in the entire world can't handle that they can't buy every beautiful thing that their eyes see in the store. And so the main problem with believing that these things have something to do with like who we are is that they back us into this corner of just believing that we're awful at things. And when there's some small kernel of truth to it, it gets even harder to let go of. Because, for example, with the dishes, would an amazing housekeeper have the dishes done every morning? Like, sure, you can imagine that, but does the massive feeling of guilt and unworthiness actually propel you into long-term change? I have absolutely no evidence that it does. And I have a mountain of evidence that it only serves to keep you stuck. Guess where I got the mountain of evidence? So step one, let go of the guilt. Okay. So taking this back to reading, stop attaching the number of pages that you read each week or the number of books that you read per year or how long that one book has been sitting on your nightstand untouched. Stop making all of that mean that you're just not good at reading, you have no time for personal development, or that you're just a bad parent who doesn't have time for parenting books if it's a parenting book, or you're just a bad Christian who doesn't have time for God if it's the Bible, right? So let's talk more about being a bad Christian because I think that's such an important one. And if you are not a Christian, you can just apply it to whatever like identity you hold dear that maybe you've been meaning to read about, right? Parenting or, marriage or something like that. Anti-racism, right? That we're like, no, I don't want to be a racist, right? So being a good or bad Christian is entirely made up. Okay. So what if we just dropped the entire spectrum of like, these ones are the good Christians and these ones are the, they're Christians, but, bless their hearts, right? What if we just let all that drop and just enjoyed being one big family? What if we just stopped kicking ourselves out of family dinner by thinking like, oh, I haven't picked up my Bible in however long it's been, right? And I got to get it together before I can actually connect with God or other people. So Brene Brown calls this not in a Christian sense, but just in the way that we're like, when I reach this goal, then I'll be worthy. She calls it prerequisites to worthiness. And last I checked, the only prerequisite to worthiness, to being a Christian, is that Jesus died for us. And you believe in him and then you're good, right? So what if we like called each other to faithfulness, not with the sense of like disciplining a wayward soul of like, you really need to get better at this, right? But more like calling a kid in from playing outside to come eat before they waste away, right? And what if we're just all good Christians with varying levels of Bible reading that don't actually have anything to do with our value to the family of God, how much God loves us. Here's what I do. It's a little bit sneaky, but it's very revealing, is I work at an after school program, and about half the kids, over half the kids go to Christian school, right? So every once in a while, and some of them have caught on that I ask them, what can you do to make God love you more? And sometimes they are chock full of ideas. Like, they have so many ideas. You got to go to church. You got to, they have so many things. You got to pray. You got to memorize verses. And I'm like, no. None of those things make God love you more, right? Like, he already loves you an infinite amount. And those are just things you can do in your relationship with him, right? So fortunately, by the time I've done it so much, so by the time they get to like second or third grade, they're like, nothing. I'm like, exactly. But then you can also play around with, what can you do that can make God love you less? Stealing things, swearing, right? And sometimes they have a bunch of answers for that too. I'm like, still nothing, guys. And so, yeah, it's just if you can connect with him or not, right? So I am not a theologian, but here is a little bit more evidence for you. If you don't believe me about how being a good or bad Christian is all made up. And you can apply this again to like whatever thing you think you should read, right? So this Christian A over here might read the verse of the day every single day, and they never skip a day. Or maybe they have like a Bible reading plan that they always read, and it's like a devotional and 2 verses. And they're like, I am winning at life. I am such a good Christian. I'm growing in my faith, blah, 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 right? And maybe some other person is like, oh my gosh, I haven't even done a word study on any of these passages. I'm not reading the verses in context. Like, that's not how you read, I didn't go to Bible college. I don't know what the fancy people do. Maybe like Lectio Divina, I've heard of that, right? But that's how we know it's all made up, because the Bible itself doesn't prescribe like how many chapters you have to read every day to be a good Christian. It says, believe in Jesus and you will be saved. And it says there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And so I think God either is super sad or super frustrated when we make all of these extra hoops that we have to jump through to accept ourselves, when he's sitting there accepting us the whole time, right? So, okay. Don't let this ruin your life if it's all made up. I have always said that I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Like, if it's all made up, don't let it ruin your life. The amount of reading that you do is neutral. You could like prove it in a court of law by going back through like your Audible history or something, or your bookmark. I don't know. And so if you are really, really attached to some thoughts that draw a straight line between the amount of reading that you do and how wonderful or terrible of a person you are, I have coaching spots open on Friday night. We could talk about that. Because I can help you just wiggle the thoughts, right? You don't have to rip them out and put something else in, because that might be too far of a jump, right? So once you drop the guilt, that may or may not mean you actually have the skills to start reading. Okay. So it may mean you do, and the guilt was just closing those skills off from being able to access it. And now you're like, okay, good. I'm good. Bye. Right? This is all I needed to watch at this workshop. Or you might be like me, and you're like so excited that you don't feel so guilty about it anymore, and you just like overshoot reality, because you don't go straight to being Wonder Woman just because you don't feel so bad anymore. So let's talk about how to make a plan that you really truly can follow through on, right? And so the priorities here are like the guiding values are honesty and kindness. Okay. So let's not go into this with the attitude of like punishing yourself that you have to catch up, right? And let's not go into it with like the rose-colored glasses of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be an awesome reader and I'm never going to struggle with this again. And suddenly the time will appear, I'm sure. If you truly believe all that, then okay. But if there's a voice in the back of your head going like, I don't think so. No, you gotta let that voice tune in. So your priority can't be living up to your grand visions of how wonderful you'll be at reading someday. And I'm not saying you should abandon that, because that grand vision is a tool we can leverage, but it's not the priority when you're sitting down to make a plan. Okay. So in coaching, yes, we'll talk about an ideal world, and like I have various tools that can leverage that to build your skills closer to what you want them to be. But when you are sitting down to make a plan, I want you solidly anchored in the actual world you live in with the actual skills you truly believe that you have right now. And not like you literally have, but the ones that you feel are like within reach. Does that make sense? So if you're like, yes, I currently read 0 pages a day, how many pages do you actually truly think is within reach? And if it's 5, then again, we're taking the guilt off of that and being like, you know what? 5 is more than 0. I truly believe I can read 5 pages a day, and not getting stuck in the black and white thinking of like, well, if I'm not reading a whole chapter every day, then I'm still failing, right? So you do have to tune in to that little voice in the back of your head that's like, yeah, right, that's not happening. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous, right? Just because you're not feeling guilty anymore doesn't mean that you can just jump into a new reality. You kind of can, but you have to believe in it. So we usually think of just new skills or new habits as the action, okay? And for a lot of things, our lower brain just handles it, and it is just an action. Like taking a shower, right? You do not have to, maybe there's some of you who do, but you do not have to be in like the perfect mental state of mind to just hop in the shower and like you forget, like, did I wash my hair or not? Like, because your lower brain is just handling it. Driving, you just hop in the car and you go, right? And so when you need to develop a new skill, your prefrontal cortex has to handle it. And your prefrontal cortex is the one that has a whole lot of thoughts about things. And each one of those thoughts creates a feeling. And then the feelings are what fuels your actions when they're not just habitual actions yet, right? So this is why guilt is not leading to you reading the book, because guilt equals run away, don't feel bad anymore, right? We think that guilt is a really helpful tool to actually make us do the thing, because then we can stop feeling guilty. But running away works just as well, if not better. And so the key to developing a new habit and a new skill is finding the actual thought and feeling that can fuel that action appropriately. And looking at just the action by itself is why this has never worked for you before, right? Because you feel motivated for a little bit, then you start thinking different thoughts like, oh, this is harder than I thought it would be, or this book is not as interesting as I thought it would be. And then poof, the motivation goes away and you're like, where did my motivation go? I don't know. Or maybe you're like, yeah, the book wasn't what I thought it would be, and that's why I stopped reading. You stopped reading because you were thinking something different than you were originally, which made you feel unmotivated instead of motivated. And then the actions changed, right? So this is my specialty. I can make a individualized like thought, feeling, action combo that is what you need to develop a new skill. Okay. So the other thing here is that your lower brain rebels against new skills. I'm kind of making this up based on my experience. But like, it's kind of like your lower brain is like, really? That guy, the prefrontal cortex, you want him to do this? he's full of so much drama and like, I'm so much better at things. It's going to be so much effort until you hand it over to me. So like, why even bother? And your lower brain's main job is only to keep you alive. That's all it wants to do. So it's like starting a new skill. That seems like a lot of effort. Let's just not and say we did and move on with life. And like, that's always a legitimate option. I don't think it makes you a horrible person if you like decide you don't actually want that goal as much as you thought you did. And it really is too much effort. And if you don't believe me, would you judge someone who's like going through trauma for deciding not to make their bed every day? Right? Or like start the new habit of just make your bed every day, right? Maybe that would be very healing for them for some reason. But you also have stuff going on. And if you're like, you know what? Now that I don't feel so guilty, I don't want to read that book. And this doesn't automatically have to be a priority right this second either. So like urgency is not particularly helpful in these situations because again, your brain just shuts down under the pressure. So let's get down to like actually making a plan though. If you decide, no, I like this book I want to read. I really do want to do it. I want you to make an extremely specific plan, right? So more specific than I'm going to start on Friday. Like mark out how many pages per day you want to read it on a calendar. Because maybe you say like, I don't know, Sunday's a pretty busy day. I'm skipping it that day, right? And then your lower brain is like, oh, good. I feel so loved and cared for. We get a break, right? But your prefrontal cortex is still the one in charge saying like, yes, we are doing the break. Decide what time of day you're doing it. Decide if you're doing an audiobook or an ebook or flipping back and forth somehow. Is there some technology out there that like flips back and forth really well? That would be fantastic. And then this is key too. You make this pretty shiny plan of like, I will read one chapter while I'm waiting for the kids in the pickup line. That's a terrible example because it's about to be summer. But, or while I'm driving to them to summer things, right? I'll just listen for that drive, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Then you're like, this is a beautiful plan. I feel really good about this. There's no little voice in the back of my head saying like, this is impractical. I want you to still go find the little voice, right? Think about all of the obstacles to actually doing the plan, right? Use your imagination. What if one day somebody calls you when you're driving? Are you going to stick with your plan to read? Or do you accept that as like, so you just match a strategy? Are you going to say, sorry, I can't talk right now. I'll call you right back. Or are you going to say, yeah, calls are fine if it happens at the time I was going to read, right? Think about all the obstacles. If you're going to wake up a little bit early, what if you have to stay up late for some reason? What's your strategy going to be? And this is where, again, the prefrontal cortex gets to stay in charge, but you can give yourself a break, right? It doesn't have to be that you just like go, no, I will power through no matter what. I will just drink caffeine. I will say no to everything else. You can do that if you want. But it just helps because at some point here, which is what we're getting to, your lower brain is going to rebel and be like, this is too much effort. I told you so, right? And you need to have your strategies thought out beforehand so that if the strategy is, yeah, we take a break then. We still have to stay up till 11 with a sick kid. We don't wake up at 6 to read. It's fine. Your prefrontal cortex is still in charge and you don't have to feel guilty about that because you decided ahead of time. The other last thing is processing the emotions that may stand in your way. Okay. Because one of the things that may stand in your way is you feel bored of the book, or you are feeling frustrated and angry that day. And you might have to like take some time to process the emotions before you can just dive in to reading your book. Okay. So this leads us to actually following through on the plan with kindness. So kind leadership. Dr. Becky says all the time, sturdy leadership. So if you want to follow some parenting accounts to know how to respond to yourself. Your lower brain is basically a toddler, and the kind of phrases that they use are extremely helpful. And maybe you have a lot of experience of like holding sturdy boundaries with little people. You're going to be like a little step ahead here. But because your lower brain is extremely suspicious of this new endeavor, following through with kindness and care is key. So that means listening to your body when it starts rebelling, and also kindly holding the boundaries of what you already decided ahead of time. So most of us start with absolutely no idea how to do that. So that's fine. Here's some examples. What we don't do is you don't minimize the feelings like, oh, come on, you're not that tired. Just suck it up. You made this plan and you always flake out, and you better just do it this time, or else you're never going to trust yourself, right? You got to think of it as like, if you were a coach, how would you motivate people kindly, right? Because you also don't give yourself a pass. So you can say something like, hey, I know you're feeling really tired, and the thing is, we made this plan, and I really want to be able to trust you and trust our teamwork. And I really want to just see what happens if we follow through on this. We've tried flaking out. Let's just see what happens if we don't flake out this time. And another thing that you can do, for some people this works. For some people, they're like, it's a trick, I'm not doing it. And it like decreases trust with yourself. Because what you want to do here is you want to build trust in yourself to follow through on things, because that's going to serve you in so many areas. I promised I wouldn't talk about those though. We're sticking to reading. So for some people, it might work to say, you know what, since we're so tired, let's just do half of it and then see how we feel. If I stay awake through half of what I was planning on reading, then great, I'll consider that a win for tonight. But really in the back of your mind, you're thinking like, I think I'll be able to do it all. I just need to get started, right? So some people that kind of, it might work for them because they're like, yeah, I'm totally fine with doing half of it. Some people, they might be like, yeah, I did half of it, and now I am bummed that I only did half of it and told myself that would be fine. For some people, they do like, okay, now I have the momentum to like finish the whole thing. And then there's other people who are like, I know this is a trick. We're going to have to do the whole thing. I don't believe you. I'm not doing any of it, right? So you just have to know your own brain. Like, don't really trick yourself. Like, you want to be building trust with yourself. But let's talk about, what are you going to do if you make your plan and then you don't follow through, right? So I cannot stress this enough. Do not turn on yourself, okay? The reason probably that you were hesitating to make a plan in the first place is not because like you're in school now and your teacher is going to be mad at you if you don't read the book, right? It's because you are going to be mad at you and mean to you if you don't follow through on the plan that you set for yourself. So it is not fair to maybe May 25th you, who with thoughtful, caring kindness and like excitement for the future, sat down, made the plan, thought of all the obstacles, thought of all the strategies. It is not fair to May 25th you for June 3rd you to go and stab her in the back with, this is a stupid plan and this book is dumb, and why did you even assign us all this, because you're just going to fail again, and this is such an awful idea, and I can't believe you listened to that Caitlin girl, and like we're going to go unfollow her now, right? Pretend you're on a team with yourself, okay? Pretend this is a group project, and any feedback you give has to be polite feedback, okay? We do this because we want to avoid, it really is like if you can blame somebody else, even if it's you in the past, then you don't have to be responsible for feeling disappointed in yourself that you didn't follow through, right? It's like, well, this person on the team made a bad plan, so how was I even supposed to do any of it, right? Don't turn on yourself. Don't stab yourself in the back and blame the other person being you 2 weeks ago, right? So that really comes down to, instead of blaming, process your emotions. Don't numb out, don't blame, don't shame. So let's say you forgot to anticipate something because life happens and you end up super disappointed and feeling like you let yourself down and feeling defeated. Maybe your go-to is to go eat half a bag of chips, right? To not feel so sad. And if your goal is to eat 4 bags of chips a week, then great, that's fine. But if your goal is not to eat 4 bags of chips a week, then you're just piling on the defeat and you're just adding to the evidence that you just suck at everything. It's like you've got a giant basket. That's why I'm doing this, that you're just going around being like, I just can't do anything. See, right? So instead of eating the chips, or maybe just in addition to, it's nice to have options. We're running out of time, but if I'm going to stick to half an hour, I have a whole course about this, but I'll give you a couple tips. Instead of numbing out, you go, okay, first of all, what emotion am I feeling? And maybe it's disappointed and maybe it's defeated, but those do feel different in your body. We feel emotions in our bodies. Okay. So what you do is you turn off the thinking part of your brain that's just adding all the fuel to the fire of like, you never do anything right. And I can't believe that we didn't think of this and blah, right? You turn off the blah, 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 blah. And I like to think of it as I'm just like getting in the like giant baby gate I have in my living room for my daughter. And it's like, yeah. Just stay out there for 1 second. Or you could think of it as like going in the bathroom, or you could literally go in the bathroom and close the door. And you guys just stay out there for 1 second. I'll get to you in a second. But right now, we're turning off the thinking brain and just going to the observing brain, where you're just watching what is happening in your body. So for example, the thoughts in your brain could be, wow, my chest feels really heavy. I feel like I'm going to cry. I have a craving for chips. And all of those feelings are getting stronger now that I'm tuning into them. And you just watch the wave of emotion. Most of the time for me, it feels like a wave, just like, all right, here we go up, and it's kind of going away now, right? And so if you need help focusing in more on how it feels, I like to ask wacky questions like, what color would this emotion be, right? Or I didn't even say this one particularly, but where is it in your body? I feel a lot of emotions in my hands and feet for some reason. And if you're like into fashion, or, if my body was an outfit, like if this emotion were an outfit, what would it look like? Or maybe for you, cars have a lot of personality. I don't know. And you're like, if this emotion were a type of vehicle, what would it be? Right. Which goes to like, is it a fast emotion or a slow emotion? Is it heavy or is it buzzy? Right. So those are all things you can do instead of turning on yourself, blaming yourself, numbing out with the chips, right? Because if you can learn that the worst thing that can happen when you fail is you feel a negative emotion and you're like, I know exactly what to do with that, then you never have to be worried about failing at things ever again, which gives you so much more freedom to actually set goals and work towards them. And the not turning on yourself also prevents future guilt. Which makes it so much easier to go ahead and do the thing you want to do, right? So couple questions to think about. Why do you want to read the thing that you want to read? Is it just because you think you're going to be a better person? You're not. But is it going to get your life closer to the life that you want to, like, is it going to raise your quality of life? Some other things to think about are, if you weren't allowed to read this book for some reason, would you feel just like a sigh of relief? Or would you be really disappointed that like all of the copies of it are out of print or something, And so just to help you think about like, what do you really want in this situation? Right. And then just disattaching it from your identity, but thinking about what do you want? Is it going to make your life better? Read the book. Great. And then just stay away from black and white thinking so that it's not like, yeah, I have to read the whole thing by the end of the week. No, you can take all the time you need, but keep your prefrontal cortex in charge of like, no, this is how much we're reading, and make it a commitment with yourself that you do actually believe you can follow through on, right? So that is all the stuff I have. And I'm curious if you have any questions or anything that wasn't clear, or if you want to be coached on something you want to read sometime, or if we're just good. It's fine for things to be 35 minutes long. I mean,
I thought it was really good to think about the obstacles, because that is often where I don't do that, and I make a plan for something like reading a book. Like I have a whole stack of them by my seat. And
yeah.
I've had the plan of like, oh, at night, you're supposed to turn your phone off. So, before you go to bed, and reading is such a good, substitute for that. And so that's when I'll read, and they're right there. I just have to reach down and pick one up. And I just don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I've never thought through like, well, what are the obstacles that I'm running into that I'm not doing that? Because it really couldn't be any easier, but it's still not happening. So I think that's a good step to, you know, be more aware of.
Right. And the action you're taking of avoiding picking up the book is being fueled. So I talked about this in a positive way of like, you can find the thought and feeling that will fuel picking up the book, but then also the action of avoiding picking it up is also being fueled by a thought and a feeling
Mhm.
that might be just
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm too tired.
Yeah.
And then you feel just apathetic or something like
Yeah.
that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it usually is that. It's just like, I'm just tired, and like, I can't even focus on anything anymore. So, but I found last couple of days, I've picked up a book while I was eating lunch, like when I'm awake. I'm like, what did I used to read? I used to read a lot. And it was when I was eating meals, or when I was, you know, I don't know, I was doing something else, but I wasn't waiting to the end of the day at my most tired point to try to absorb information.
And that's the thing too, is I think we talked about this on the other call the other night, but there's the possible practice of, you read a lot. When do you read? How do you read? And seeing like, okay, they read audiobooks, or they read at lunch, or they read while their kids are napping or something like that. There's actually the action that they're taking that you could think like, yes, that works for me. But behind that action is a thought and feeling that they are thinking and feeling, that could just be, this is what I always do. And they believe that 100% because it is what they always do.
Mhm.
And then they just feel like settled or peaceful or like natural, and they just go ahead and read, right? And there can be the like, just try it on of like, this is just who I am. I just read at lunchtime. That's what I always do. And just try it on. You don't have to believe it 100%. But you do have to acknowledge that you're not believing it 100%, or else your brain will just be like, no, we don't. No, we don't. Right. And just be like, no, we're just trying it on. This is just what I always do. Right. And so sometimes it's fun to like borrow an outfit from somebody else of like, oh, I can see the glitzy, glittery like dress that you're wearing, but like, yeah, what are the thoughts and feelings that are behind that?
Mhm.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. And I'm going to put this on YouTube, I think. And I think it'll be on my Facebook too. So, yep. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.